according to eyewitnesses. There was a tense and emotional scene as emergency medical teams rushed to the set and quickly transported Kirk Frost to the hospital. Everyone was left wondering what had caused such a sudden breakdown. But the real story behind his condition is far more explosive than anyone expected. Kirk Frost, the once confident and charismatic star of love and hip-hop, was found unconscious upon the set after a shocking collapse that left fans and cast members in complete disbelief. Fans were unaware that Kirk Frost had been secretly using dangerous substances to deal with the pressures of his fame and personal life, a habit he kept hidden from everyone, including his wife, Rashida, who has always been the rock of the family, but is now facing the unimaginable. Just hours before Kirk's collapse, she posted a heartfelt message on Instagram, which she quickly deleted after receiving overwhelming support. Kirk had been dealing with serious personal demons for months, and the truth about his deteriorating health has finally surfaced. Entire world has been turned upside down, leaving fans wondering what drove Kirk to this point and how Rashida will react. Stay tuned for the full story as we reveal the shocking details of Kirk Frost's darkest secret. That morning, the Love and Hip Hop set was bustling as usual. The cameras were rolling and the cast was getting ready for another day of drama-filled filming. But nobody anticipated what happened next. Kirk Frost, the show's veteran star, unexpectedly collapsed, leaving everyone stunned. Crew members rushed to his side in a panic, and paramedics were called right away. Kirk, who had always been the center of attention, was now lying motionless, his body unresponsive. And fans watching from home were glued to their screens, wondering what had happened to the man who had seemingly overcome all obstacles on and off screen. Almost immediately after Kirk was rushed to the hospital, unsettling rumors began to circulate. And it wasn't just fatigue or stress from filming that caused his sudden breakdown, as many initially believed, darker and more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Rumors started to circulate that Kirk was fighting a secret battle that was far more dangerous than what the cameras had ever shown. Sources close to the couple started to leak shocking information about Kirk's private life. Nobody knew that he had been fighting a battle with substances that he couldn't control for months. The man who had once been the charming, self-assured husband and father was now a shell of himself, consumed by his inner demons. Rashida, who had always been by his side, was unaware that Kirk was concealing such a sinister secret from the public. Their marriage seemed stable, their family seemed picture-perfect, and they had survived hardships together, including infidelity, rumors, family problems, and the demands of celebrity. However, it was not a trivial dispute or a scandal that could be resolved with a public apology. Rather, it was Kirk's health and his life. And Rashida was left in the dark as everything she believed she knew about her husband began to fall apart. Before her eyes, Rashida had posted a heartfelt message on as the story unfolded. Fans were left with more questions than answers because the media is always quick to sensationalize a story. The Instagram post was a love letter to her husband, celebrating their years together and expressing gratitude for their shared journey. However, within minutes of posting, it was deleted, leaving fans perplexed as to why Rashida would remove such a heartfelt message. What had happened between the time she posted and the collapse that led her to take it down? Was she aware of what was going on with Kirk, or was she too preoccupied with being the supportive wife and oblivious to the destruction occurring behind closed doors? Jumped on the drama surrounding the hashtag Kirk Frost collapse, which went viral in a matter of hours. Fans were desperate to know what had caused their favorite reality star to collapse behind the scenes. And Rashida was in a state of shock as her world, which had always seemed so stable, was now collapsing before her eyes. She had built her career alongside Kirk, raised their children, and faced numerous challenges. When Kirk's collapse occurred, it was only the beginning of a series of events that would reveal the truth about his addiction. The first rumors of his covert substance struggles surfaced, but no one could have predicted how deep the problem ran. The more people learned, the more they realized that wasn't just about Kirk's physical health, but also about the toll his addiction had taken on every aspect of his life, including his career. Together, however, she didn't know how to handle. The fallout from Kirk's collapse affected not only him, but the entire Love and Hip Hop family as well. Some cast members who had been close to Kirk were shocked and felt betrayed by the man they thought they knew, while others were devastated and heartbroken that Kirk, who had been a part of their lives for so long, had fallen so far. There was a sense of betrayal not only from Kirk, but also from the system that had allowed him to conceal his addiction for so long. Rashida had to deal with the public while navigating the emotional turmoil of learning her husband's secret. In the meantime, the media was rushing to report every new detail, no matter how shocking or sensational, and news outlets reported that Kirk had been spotted multiple times in the weeks leading up to the collapse, appearing disoriented and unfocused. Fans who had loved their marriage were now questioning everything they had ever known about the couple. Rashida was under tremendous pressure to reconcile the image of the man she loved with the truth that was now coming to light. Could she support him through this, or was their marriage too broken to repair? I was wondering if Kirk had reached this point because of the pressures of the show, the constant drama, the public scrutiny, or something deeper and more personal that had made him turn to drugs as a coping mechanism. At the hospital, doctors were trying to stabilize Kirk's condition because his collapse had raised alarms, and the medical staff was doing everything they could to figure out what had happened. However, it was evident that this wasn't an isolated incident. Kirk's health had been declining for a while, and it was only a matter of time until the truth was revealed. Every moment felt like an eternity as she waited for answers. As the hours went by, Kirk's condition stabilized, but the damage had already been done. His collapse had revealed more than just his addiction. It had revealed the cracks in his marriage, the hidden struggles he had been facing, and the confusion. She had been caught off guard by Kirk's addiction. But now she had to decide whether to stay by his side and support him through recovery or leave and protect herself and their family from further pain. As the days after Kirk's collapse went by, the media storm only made rumors about his secret struggles more intense. Each story was more sensational than the last, and fans who had been enthralled with Kirk's larger-than-life persona now felt betrayed, because the man they had watched on their screens for years had been hiding a dark side. The world was watching to see what would happen next. Would Rashida stand by her man, or would this be the end of their fairy tale? The love and hip-hop world was about to change forever, and the Frost family was no exception. And they were unable to ignore it. For Rashida, the fallout was overwhelming, and the woman who had always been the pillar of their family was now dealing with an emotional roller coaster. She had never thought that Kirk, the man she had shared her life with, would be battling addiction in such a covert and destructive way. She had always viewed Kirk as a strong, dependable husband and father who had supported her through thick and thin. But now everything was in doubt. The love they had developed, the family they had established, and everything appeared to be hanging by a thread. The days that followed were a blur for Rashida, who spent hours in the hospital sitting by Kirk's bedside and watching him fight for his recovery. It broke her heart to see him so frail and vulnerable, after having been so vibrant and full of energy. But what hurt even more was the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She had trusted Kirk with everything: their marriage, their children, and their future in. Now she had to deal with the fact that he had kept this dark secret from her for so long. While Rashida struggled with her own feelings, the rest of the world watched intently, with news outlets providing constant coverage of Kirk's. The public was divided and under intense scrutiny as new information about Kirk's addiction started to surface. According to sources close to the Frost family, Kirk had been using substances for months, if not longer. It was unclear exactly when it had started, but the signs had been there. Collapse and the subsequent revelations about his addiction caused social media to be buzzing with speculation, and fans were quick to voice their opinions. Some expressed sympathy for Kirk, expressing concern for his health and well-being, while others criticized him for betraying Rashida and their family. The most startling revelations came from a fellow cast member who had worked closely with Kirk during the filming of Love and Hip Hop. According to this source, Kirk had been exhibiting signs of a substance problem long before his collapse. Were times when he was visibly disoriented, unable to focus, and seemingly disconnected from the reality around him. But he had managed to keep it hidden from everyone, even from those closest to him. Friends and coworkers started to speak out for a while, with some saying they had witnessed Kirk acting strangely on set, while others revealed that they had observed his unpredictable behavior in private. We all thought it was just the stress of the show, but looking back, it's clear now that something was off with him for a long time. He wasn't himself. There were days when he couldn't even remember his lines, or he'd zone out in the middle of a scene. We just thought it was a burnout. Rashida's emotional turmoil deepened as more stories came to light, and no one realized the full extent of what he was dealing with. In the midst of her emotional crisis, Rashida decided to take to Instagram, where her account, which had previously been filled with loving posts about her family and career, was now the stage for a much more somber message. Rashida had always prided herself on being a strong, independent woman, but was a different kind of challenge. Could she stand by her husband after everything that had been revealed? Could she forgive him for betraying her trust in such a profound way? "I'm broken." Rashida wrote, "I never thought we would be here. Kirk and I have been through so much, and I thought we were stronger than this. But now I'm just trying to make sense of it all. I'm trying to understand how we got here and what comes next for us." The post went viral almost immediately, and it was a desperate attempt to explain the situation to her followers and possibly even to herself. Some fans expressed their anger and disappointment, accusing Kirk of betraying Rashida and their family. The backlash was swift, and Rashida's decision to publicly express her feelings only seemed to fuel the fire. Hours after posting, Rashida deleted the message, prompting some to speculate that she had received backlash from her team or from Kirk's side of the family, urging her to remove the post to protect their image. However, not all of the fans were sympathetic, felt that the intense emotions of the moment had caused her to reconsider her choice to disclose so much to the public. In the weeks that followed, Rashida kept quiet about the incident, continuing to raise their children and pursue her business endeavors in public. But there was a noticeable gap between her and Kirk. The two had not been spotted together since the collapse, and there were rumors that Rashida was thinking about splitting up with Kirk. Meanwhile, Kirk's recuperation was sluggish, and he spent several weeks in the hospital receiving treatment. The media kept speculating about the state of his marriage, asking whether Kirk's addiction was the last straw for Rashida, or whether she would support him as he worked to change his life. The answers were unclear, but it was clear that Kirk's future, both personally and professionally, was in jeopardy. He received counseling to address his addiction, and family members, friends, and even some of his Love and Hip Hop co-stars visited him to offer their support as he worked to get better. But the road to recovery was lengthy, and the damage done to his marriage and public image was irreversible. The pressure of fame, the demands of being a reality TV star, and the weight of his personal issues had all contributed to his downward spiral. But as he sat in the sterile confines of a hospital room surrounded by medical staff and family members, he realized that the battle for his life was far from over. Kirk entered the next phase of his recovery, leaving Rashida to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. Would she be able to forgive him? And more importantly, could she forgive him? Rashida's silence was deafening. She had become a symbol of resilience to her fans, but now they were starting to wonder how much longer she could hold on. The weight of the situation was starting to take a toll on her, and the cracks in her emotional armor were becoming harder to hide, despite the fact that their marriage survived the devastation caused by his addiction. The world waited with bated breath for answers, but one thing was certain: the Frost family would never be the same again. intense media attention, Rashida kept her true feelings somewhat hidden. On the outside, she supported Kirk's recovery, but on the inside, she was finding it difficult to process everything. The once loving couple was now estranged, and every conversation felt more tense than the last. At times, Rashida would visit Kirk in the hospital, sitting quietly next to his bed. And she would watch as he gradually started to regain his strength and his once vibrant personality faded into a shadow of what Rashida had always prided herself on, being a strong, independent woman, but the emotional roller coaster she was on was pushing her boundaries. The trust they had built over the years now seemed fragile. And with every day that went by, she found herself wondering if their marriage could withstand the storm. Meanwhile, the media wasn't letting up. The taboos were unrelenting. And Kirk came under intense scrutiny from both fans and critics alike. His once gilded reputation had taken a massive hit, and many of his former supporters were starting to turn against him. And social media was rife with conflicting views. Some defended him, thinking he was just another victim of the demands of Toka. And we saw no eyes of Toka Celeste, and we all know I've been exploring that and we all know I've been exploring that path. And many of his former supporters were starting to turn against. And we so flowing, we said, as we said, see with. We said slash with so not a waste quist slash dicative. So we said perfed, pha. We said we were in with cup at cup to see with C to see come up to go cup to we sweet to be to get it we go to see do so do you guide sutta we do we you say go to you good to kak high kaklitis the kick to I cook fit a silk guy at kiss what you I would the at the farther we said we you going to can do it you got the cuff celebrity while others attacked him, accusing him of being careless and selfish. Every action he took was tracked, and the media seized on even the smallest mistake. One morning, an anonymous source close to the Frost family revealed new information that rocked everyone to their core. Kirk had been battling addiction for a lot longer than anyone had realized. The source said that Kirk's addiction had started in the early days of their marriage, but had gone unnoticed for years. At first, Kirk had been able to manage his habit, keeping it under wraps while still maintaining his responsibilities as a father, husband, and reality TV star. But as the pressures of fame and personal life increased, so did his reliance on substances. This was shocking to many, especially Rashida, who had never suspected that Kirk was dealing with such a heavy burden. She had always believed in her husband, in their love, and in the life they had built together. But now she was confronted with the terrible realization that everything she had known was based on lies. How could she ever trust him again? How could she rebuild their relationship after all the years of secrecy and betrayal? This new revelation was like a punch to Rashida's gut. The once self-assured and ambitious man who had built a life with her was now a shadow of himself, fighting something far more powerful than he had ever imagined. Rashida disclosed the extent of her emotional suffering in a private conversation with close friends. She admitted that she was lost and unsure of what lay ahead for her and her family. She had supported Kirk for years, sticking by him through all the highs and lows of their reality TV journey. But now she had to decide whether to move on or continue to stand by him. People didn't understand, Rashida told her friends with tears in her eyes. I gave him everything, my heart, my trust, my family. But now I don't know if I can keep doing this. How can I be strong for everyone else when I'm breaking inside? Her friends reassured her that she had every right to feel the way she did, reminding her that she didn't have to bear the burden of everything alone, and that her health and happiness were just as important as Kirk's recovery. However, Rashida was conflicted because she didn't want to leave Kirk in his hour of need. But she also knew that she couldn't continue to put health at risk for a relationship that had been tainted by so many lies. Meanwhile, Kirk's recovery process went on, but it was evident that his battle was far from over. He was receiving intensive treatment, attempting to address the underlying causes of his addiction and learn coping mechanisms without turning to drugs. But even as he made progress, the harm to his reputation and his marriage continued to be a continual source of suffering. In an exclusive interview with the Gossip blog, one of Kirk's longtime friends, who had seen his hardships firsthand, stated that the reality star had been using drugs to deal with the demands of his marriage and career, and that he had become more and more withdrawn in recent months. As the weeks went by, Rashida started to exhibit signs of emotional exhaustion. She continued to support Kirk through his recovery, but the toll it was taking on her became more noticeable, and she started to withdraw from public events. As the friend explained, Kirk's addiction problems were not just a result of his fame, but also had their roots in deeper personal struggles that he had never shared with anyone. Kirk has always been a proud guy, the friend said, and he didn't want anyone to know that he was struggling. In an attempt to regain some control over her life, Rashida began concentrating more on her career, canceling appearances, and spending more time alone with her thoughts. She began launching new projects and products to divert her attention from the chaos surrounding her personal life. But even in her professional success, the shadow of Kirk's addiction loomed large. No matter how hard she tried to concentrate on her work, the pain of the betrayal she had endured was always there, just beneath the surface. At the same time, in a heart-to-heart talk with his family, Kirk expressed his regret for the pain he had caused and his determination to make amends. "I know I've messed up," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "but I'm not sure I'm at fault." Kirk was making progress in his recovery. He was going to therapy sessions and support groups and working hard to rebuild the trust he had lost. But no matter how hard he tried, he knew that repairing his marriage would be the hardest part of his journey to win back Rashida's forgiveness. Despite his sincere apology, Rashida remained cautious and couldn't get rid of the feeling that their relationship might never be the same. The broken trust was difficult to mend, but she still loved Kirk in her heart, and that love, albeit wounded, was what prevented her from leaving him as Kirk continued his recovery. The media circus surrounding his addiction never stopped. The world was watching to see if the Frost family could rise from the ashes of this scandal and find a way to move forward. As the weeks turned into months, Kirk and Rashida's relationship remained under intense scrutiny, with the media relentlessly focusing on the details of their personal life. With both fans and critics forming their own opinions about it, the press dissected and analyzed every new development and update. But the real question on everyone's mind was whether Kirk and Rashida could overcome the damage caused by his addiction. Could they rebuild their marriage, or was it truly over? The public's perception of the Frost family's future varied. Some thought Rashida would eventually leave Kirk and move on, while others hoped for a miraculous recovery and reconciliation. Nevertheless, behind closed doors in their home, Rashida had to make a decision that only she could make, and her emotions were torn. She spent sleepless nights considering her options. Should she stay and help Kirk rebuild his life, or should she'll leave and start over? She had given him everything, but now everything had, "I'm sorry," Kirk would say in their private moments, "I never meant to hurt you like this. I love you, and I'll do everything in my power to mend the trust between us." Changed. The betrayal she felt was profound. And even though her heart ached for him, she couldn't ignore the gaping hole that had formed in their marriage. Kirk, for his part, was working tirelessly to get better, attending therapy regularly, going to support groups, and seeking redemption in every way he knew how. But Rashida remained distant despite his best efforts. "I'll spend the rest of my life demonstrating that I can be the man you deserve." But Rashida's reaction was frequently one of silence, because she wasn't sure if she could continue to believe in him. The emotional scars were still present, and every time she looked at him, the pain of his betrayal came flooding back. She had already been through a lot, supporting him through thick and thin, but this felt like too much. Could she truly forgive them? Could their marriage survive? In a rare moment of vulnerability, Rashida confided in her close friends over lunch. "Rashida, you've always been strong for everyone else," one of her friends said gently. "But now, you have to ask yourself if this relationship is worth the emotional toll it's taking on you. Are you staying because you love him, or are you staying out of obligation?" Her friends, who had always admired her strength, listened and offered consolation and advice, but they also made it clear that Rashida had to prioritize her own happiness. This was the first time in weeks that she had shown such raw emotion. Kirk's recovery continued, but it wasn't without setbacks. He had relapsed a few times, finding solace in his old habits, when the pressure of reality TV and his failing marriage became too much. Every time he stumbled, the guilt weighed heavier on him, because he knew that his mistakes were serious. Rashida couldn't readily respond to the question because she had always put her family first. And Kirk had played a big part in that. However, now it felt like her family was disintegrating, and there was no way to put the pieces back together. Without excruciating pain, we're endangering his chances of recovery, but he was unable to control his addiction. The cycle of recovery and relapse seemed to go on forever. In an effort to regain some control over his life, Kirk started talking to his old friends and family for support, going to private therapy sessions, and even working with a spiritual advisor. However, he knew deep down that the real struggle was not just about escaping the hold of drugs, but also about repairing his relationship with Rashida, which was becoming more and more distant from the public's perception. The public seemed to enjoy the drama, speculating on whether or not the couple would make it for Kirk. It was an unnecessary layer of stress. It was something he had to deal with. Although some fans remained hopeful and applauded his efforts to seek help and reclaim his life, others were less forgiving. The media was unforgiving, constantly reminding everyone of his past mistakes with headlines like "Kirk Frost, a man destroyed by addiction, and will Rashida ever forgive Kirk?" dominating gossip columns. While browsing social media one evening, Kirk came across a post that deeply affected him. It was from a fan who had followed their journey for years. And the message was straightforward: "But cutting Rashida deserves better than this." Kirk had seen similar before, but this one felt different because it was from a fan who had once supported him, not just a random critic. The comment haunted him, and he couldn't get rid of the feeling that he had failed. Not only Rashida, but also the people who had once believed in him. The guilt knew him, but he knew that the only way to make things right was to. Rashida, on the other hand, had started to distance herself from the public eye. Her Instagram posts had become sparse, and when she did share something, it was frequently ambiguous and cryptic. The once open and outspoken reality star had become more reserved. And one evening, she posted a message that was tinged with melancholy. He couldn't undo the damage he had caused, but he could work every day to improve. The public's opinion of Rashida became divided after her emotional post. Some fans sympathized with her pain, acknowledging that she had been through a lot, while others accused her of airing her personal life too much, feeling that it was unfair. The post was quickly deleted, but the damage was done. The caption read, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting go." It showed her sitting alone in her home in silence, looking out at the city skyline. Rashida, however, didn't care about what other people thought. She was focused on her own healing, which had gotten harder as the pressure mounted. Kirk, on the other hand, was confronting the truth of the situation. His road to redemption was longer and more complicated than he had ever imagined. Every step forward seemed to be followed by 2 steps back. He was fighting his inner demons and the consequences of his addiction. But he knew that it wasn't just his personal recovery that was at stake, it was his marriage. As the public watched the Frost family navigate the most trying chapter of their lives, the future remained uncertain, and the emotional toll grew heavier with each new headline. Would Kirk and Rashida find their way back to each other, or would their relationship remain another casualty of fame, addiction, and betrayal? Only time would tell in the months following Kirk's ongoing struggles. Even though he had done everything he could to make amends, there was no guarantee that she would ever fully forgive him. Rashida's struggles were a roller coaster of emotions. She had been patient, but the silence between them seemed to get louder every day. Kirk's dedication to his recovery was clear, but every time she looked at him, she couldn't help but feel as though they were drifting apart. It was as if they were living in two different worlds, one where he was fighting his demons, and the other where she had to pick up the pieces of their broken reality. Rashida, who had once been the epitome of resilience, began to doubt her own ability to support Kirk. Given that his addiction had Rashida found herself thinking about the unthinkable possibility of leaving the man she had once called her soulmate. But the idea felt strange and painful. She had always believed in the vows they made to each other in sickness and in health, for better or worse. But now the weight of those words felt like a burden. Could she continue to pretend that everything was okay, when deep down she was grieving for the future they had once dreamed of? Her heart ached with the desire to see Kirk recover, but her mind couldn't ignore the damage his actions had caused. Self-preservation Kirk, who felt that the gap between them was widening, took another step toward his recovery by enrolling in a more intensive, holistic healing-focused rehabilitation program. He was working hard to heal not only his addiction, but also the broken pieces of his life. But despite his hard work, Kirk couldn't help but wonder if it was too late. If Rashida was already too far gone, and if he could ever make up for the pain he had caused her. He had restless nights contemplating whether their love was strong enough to withstand the storm they had endured. The media, always thirsty for drama, kept stoking the fires with new rumors, each more outrageous than the last. Some said Kirk had relapsed yet again, while others said Rashida had already moved on to someone new. The truth, however, was more complicated. The reality of their situation was a quiet battle that took place behind closed doors, out of the public's prying eyes. One day, following an emotional conversation, Rashida posted a mysterious message on Instagram. Healing is a journey, not a destination. In the days that followed, Rashida stayed silent, avoiding interviews and public appearances. Her silence spoke volumes, as if she was processing everything in private. The post sent shockwaves through their fan base. Would she be referring to her marriage? Fans flooded her comments with words of encouragement, but also expressed concern. The questions about the state of her marriage were louder than ever. Was she really considering ending it? Or was she just talking about her own emotional healing, independent of Kirk's struggles? Rashida concentrated more on her business endeavors, giving her all to her work as a way to regain control. She had always been a strong, independent woman, and it felt empowering to channel her energy into something productive. Meanwhile, Kirk, who had always been the more vocal one, found himself in the background. He was trying his hardest to support his family, but his battle with addiction and the strain on his marriage left him feeling isolated. His friends and family rallied around him, but he knew the road to redemption would be long and uncertain. Despite the difficulties in her personal life, Rashida was determined to stay active in the business world. Fender fans noticed her new projects on social media. However, the question remained: would she stay with Kirk, or would she leave the man she had once fully trusted? The tension was evident, and Kirk was trying to remain optimistic. But the weight of the uncertainty was too much for him to bear. He knew that his actions had consequences. And he couldn't avoid the fact that Rashida's love and trust in him had been shattered. And the family was still divided, though some members came together in support of Kirk, offering him the help he needed to recover, while others were more critical, stating that it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. Everyone had an opinion, but Rashida's was the only one that mattered. She had to make the difficult decision of whether to support Kirk or let go in the story's final moments. There is still uncertainty about the Frost's future. Will Rashida find it in her heart to forgive Kirk? Or has the damage been done beyond repair? The tension is still high, and it is evident that this is a story as more events take place behind the scenes. that's far from over. What do you think will happen next in this emotional roller coaster of a relationship between Kirk and Rasha? Will they weather this storm together, or is it really the end? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on this drama as it unfolds. You can also follow for the latest news on your favorite stars